G'day expats and welcome to another episode of Expat Chat, episode number 56 today. And joined, for those who are viewing us on my left or your right, depending on how you're looking at it, is mate and colleague James Ridley, who runs the Australian office as Managing Director for the APAC region. G'day, James.
G'day, Brett, and ladies and gentlemen who are joining us today. I'm joined by my co-host, Brett Evans, founder and Managing Director for the EMEA region, based right now in the sandpit, Dubai. Very hot, 45, 50 degree days. Don't know how you do it. I couldn't. How are you going?
Mate, cold beers fix everything.
I owe you a carton, by the way, after you picking that 0.5% cash rate.
Actually, no. So, and this is also a call out to Rick Ood as
Bit of relief.
Rick hit me up on Twitter saying, congrats on the new carton. And I went back and looked at the episode and it was 3 forecasts. So I think I'm in, I said 50 for 50 for June, 50 for July. And then I said 25 or above for August. So
I'll have to have a chat to Rick. He's my client and
So
make me throw up a carton of beer. Maybe I'll send him a carton.
I think that's what he's after. So yeah, as long as the RBA increases rates in August, the bet's won. But if they don't, then I think I can't remember what I offered you. I think I said I'd buy you a shawarma, which is a pretty average end of the deal. So
that's right, mate.
It's like an Arabic kebab.
Yeah, I'm definitely getting the ugly stick there, mate. Today, good episode. Ping pong expats. Now, we'll probably need to define what a ping pong expat is. But before we jump into today's episode, man, I'll let you run the legal disclaimer.
Nice little disclaimer here to say all information that we are going to talk about today should be ignored, and you should treat this as nonsensical advice. Please do not construe this as personal advice and talk to a professional like that.
Silky smooth. I love it.
And look, not only ping pong expats, but I also call them boomerangs as well. This is something Atlas has been going now for 12 years. And even pre-COVID, we had this, I call clients boomerangs, where they'll come back to Australia after a time overseas and then realize, but nah, in that great Aussie way.
No.
And then they come back out again. So, whether you call them ping pong expats, boomerang expats, I think we want to talk about today is, if you think this is a possibility, how do you manage this? How do you, navigate without having to build Rome, tear Rome down, then rebuild Rome again, on both of those sides. So, mate, let's run through it. To me, the rule of thumb I've always said with all clients is, if this is even a 10% chance of you going back overseas, don't rush into putting too many structures, putting too many roots down, economically speaking, on your return, even though you want to come in and, do this and this and this because you're now an Australian tax resident. Unfortunately, those structures and those positions aren't as good as a non-resident, leading to adverse outcomes. And if you do think you're bound back overseas, there's every chance that you're going to have to deconstruct all these things. So whether it's setting up trusts or self-managed super funds or all these sort of things, bucket companies is another one. 9 times out of 10, it's not the best thing to actually go through that process. And then the reason being is because, when you're a non-resident, you are treated as no different to a Chinese, a Russian or a British investor. So you need to map to those sort of actions. When you're an Australian resident, if you think you're staying there, then fantastic. Guess what? It's great. But do not go, and it makes you feel good. Oh, I've got this trust, and we've got this, bloodline trust doing this, and family discretion trust doing this, and bucket company doing this. But, and sometimes you can't anticipate that move back overseas, but that's what we would say. It's don't do anything for the first 6 months. Just get settled in, see whether this is you. Sometimes you'll get a job offer out of the blue. You can't anticipate that. But personally, and, as a, not a career decision, but a personal decision, you'll know in the first 6 months whether that move is right or wrong for both you and the family. So what we talk about is making sure everything's malleable and flexible enough to be able to cope with that change. That is what good financial advice is. Now, the other complicating, the fly in the ointment, is going to be the new residency rules. And you'll run through those great folks back home and on the call, how probably the new residency rules will squash the concept of a boomerang or a ping pong expat.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, and one thing you touch on there is about complex structures, SMSFs, trust. That definitely is just going to make the whole burden of becoming an expat probably more expensive. And either look at how they can be maintained or just pulling them all down, to be honest. So it can make your affairs a lot more complex. The new residency rules that have been proposed, listen, not enacted, were meant to be enacted 7 days ago, but we know how the government works. They will make it a lot harder for you to become a non-resident in the future. And the main reason is ceasing residency. The ceasing residency test, they want to make sure one of the key items under the ceasing residency test is this overseas employment rule. We can't sort of leave Australia and go in search of a new career path or our dream job anymore. We actually need to have on paper some sort of contract, which I believe is for a minimum of 2 to 3 years. We need to be able to show that we have accommodation in that area in which we're working. And I guess if we don't have those kind of simple things set up, then yes, a lot harder to cease our Australian tax residency. As well as the overseas employment rule, we also need to meet the 45-day test and the factor test. So we need to make sure that, okay, next financial year, we're not in Australia for more than 45 days in that financial year. We need to make sure that if we are in Australia for more than 45 days, well, we don't satisfy 2 factors. And again, this is trying to make sure we're still a non-resident or becoming a non-resident. Those factor tests, unfortunately, they are a bit of a catch-all. When we look at the factor test, right to reside in Australia, it's a permanent citizen or Australian citizen.
That's right.
Or a permanent resident. Exactly right.
It's an automatic pass.
That's right. Australian economic interest. That can be an investment property. That could be a super fund. We're not sure on that one just yet. That could be a bank account with some savings in it. They need to flesh that out more as part of the explanatory memorandum. If they put those kind of economic interests as part of the criteria, that'll be everyone. So the way they design is a bit of a catch-all. The other 2, Australian accommodation, main residence that's not rented out, move into it straight away. Even a timeshare in a hotel, that's ridiculous, but that's how the way they worded it. And lastly, Australian family. If we've got kids, absolutely. Anyone under the age of 18 or financial dependent, spouse, those sort of things back in Australia, even kids that might be bordering back in Australia, but we're not there, leaving them behind. Yes, you'll comfortably still maintain your Australian tax residency. And that's the concern. Ping pong expats, they're going to have to do a lot more to sever ties with Australia from a tax position. Otherwise, you're paying tax to say, whatever it might be, Singapore, the US and Australia, and you're the one that has the hard task of trying to marry up the tax treaties and, the relevant foreign tax credits, which are coming across. So yes, new residency rules will make it a lot harder to be a boomerang or a ping pong expat. Absolutely. So when it comes to navigating that space, you don't know what the future holds. You don't know if you're heading back overseas. So yes, it's hard to plan for that. But as Brett said, usually you'll know within 6 months if you've made the right decision, especially from a personal level, and whether you're going to stay in that location.
Yeah, exactly right, man. I think that's the biggest thing. It's, it's like that old adage about when you win lotto, the best thing you can do is put 95% of the money in a term deposit for 12 months and go and blow 5%, because when you've got that benefit of hindsight, what's going on. It can seem tempting to put down roots and do those sort of things, but yeah, sometimes you just need to cool your jets, take your time, because as you say, first of all, a lot of the structures, a lot of, those complicating things aren't positive for expats. So the last thing you want to do is go and spend a lot of money setting them up, then to unwind it. And second of all, if and when these new residency rules come in, it is going to make it difficult. Now we're going to have a 2-horse race here. Those people who are going to countries with DTAs, double taxation agreements, will get a more favourable result in coming out, and they'll have more flexibility. But if you are someone who is coming out of, or coming into a country that doesn't have a DTA, then things are getting a lot more difficult. So that laissez-faire approach of bouncing back and forth, which expats have had that luxury over the last sort of forever, is going to be gone. So I think need to do your homework, need to have complete conviction going back. Sometimes you don't have a choice, but if you do have a choice, you need to be Johnny on the spot when it comes to knowing that this is forever. Well, not forever, but this is for the long term. Otherwise, it is going to create problems. So, mate, I think we covered off that one well. So I think we leave it there. So good to catch up as always, and we'll see you on episode 57. Will be the next week.
Sounds good, mate. No worries. Have a good day. Speak soon.
Okay. Thanks, mate. Take care.
Cheers, mate.